If you're looking for a little bit of luxury, this could be the car for you. Not only is the Lexus UX one of the brand's smaller cars, it's also surprisingly luxurious for an entry-grade model. Not only that, it's the first Lexus to transfer over to the TNGA platform from Toyota, meaning it's really nice to drive. But does all that add up to a car that's worth driving out of the showroom? In this review, we'll try and find that out by having a look at its features, taking it for a drive, and hopefully working out whether it's right for you. But before I dive into it, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below and you'll get 2 new wheels review videos every single week. This specific car we have here today is the UX250h Sport Luxury all-wheel drive. In terms of price, it's towards the top of the range at $63,500 before on-roads. It's effectively one of the 2 top-tier versions of the UX, the other being the F Sport. The F Sport is 64 grand, though front-wheel drive variants of both are available at just under 60,000. If you're keen on a UX and that sounds a bit steep, the range does actually start with non-hybrid engines from around 46,500. Even the cheapest hybrid, the 250h Luxury, costs 50 grand, and given Lexus sedans start at around the 60,000 mark, this is kind of the entry-level Lexus now. But don't let that fool you, nor the fact that underneath this is effectively a Toyota Corolla platform. The Lexus UX has its own, much more upmarket personality. Its looks aren't exactly groundbreaking, but I think the UX has a pretty nice modern interpretation of Lexus's design language. And in the age of giant mouths on the fronts of cars, I think the Lexus spindle grille is one of the better looking ones. Here on the UX, it lines up nicely with all of the other features on the front of the car as well. These headlights, which I quite like, line up nicely with the top of the grille. Then down on the sides here, we've got these fake vents with little fog lamps in the bottom of them. Quite nice little bit of chrome strip along the bottom of the front of the grille as well. We've got ours in white, and it's actually a $1,500 pearl white option. But it's not the most exciting color on this car from a distance, nor is it with any car really. Here on the UX, I think dark metallic colors look quite nice. Up the top of the range, we get these 18-inch alloy wheels wrapped in run-flat tyres. But down the bottom of the range, and the luxury variants, you get 17-inch wheels wrapped in regular tyres. We've also got this black plastic cladding all the way along the side and up over the wheel arches and kind of signifies that it's a crossover SUV. We've got some chrome trim through the mirror caps, around the windows, and also in chrome the hybrid badge down the back door, which obviously signifies its drivetrain. And then we get to the back of the car where the roof starts to slope down, becomes kind of a hatchback shape. Up on top of the roof, we also have these rails, which have little holes that you could mount something on them with. Wrapping around from the side is the taillight. Obviously, there's plenty of it. It wraps all the way along the back of the car. Down below, there's more of the black plastic cladding, which has some reflectors and some lights in it as well. But the boot itself is powered, and you don't actually have to have your hands free to do it. You can come up, use your foot to use the sensor and open the boot. Like that. Inside the boot, there's 424 litres of space, which is actually plenty for a small SUV. Even something like a Hyundai Kona has 50 litres less. Also, because this car has run-flat tyres, there's no spare wheel, which means there's extra room under here, which makes up part of that 424 litres. If you need even more space, you can also obviously fold down the rear seats. From the driver's seat, there's a lot to love about the UX. Even though Lexus and Toyota aren't necessarily at the forefront of the cutting edge, the UX is a relatively recently designed car, so it looks a lot more up-to-date than some of its larger SUV siblings. As I say up-to-date, let's ignore the fact that it does actually have a CD player, but it's a nicely laid out cabin and looks quite pretty. These seats, for example, caramel leather in this case, are both heated and cooled, and the controls are quite easy to get to, just down here below that CD player. They've also got an automatic option so that you don't need to constantly be resetting how warm or cool you are. There's a wireless charging pad for your phone hidden down here and tucked away so that in cornering, it's not going to fly off and hit you in the knee. In front of that, there's a couple of cup holders which are quite nicely designed. They could fit quite a large water bottle or a small takeaway coffee cup, although if you do put anything in them, it means you can't quite get to your phone. Probably not the worst thing while you're driving. Behind that, a pretty standard shifter, which is kind of nice to see these days, although next to that, something I'm not so keen to see is Lexus's trackpad. I know I'm not alone in that. Using it as a cursor to control Lexus's interface is not the easiest and it's not the cleanest layout, Although these days, Android Auto and Apple CarPlay are much nicer to use, and if you do use one of those, you probably already are familiar with the layout and makes this much easier. Behind that, there's some media controls just in front of the storage here, which is quite clever. It opens both ways for the driver and the passenger. Here in the driver's seat, everything in front of me is quite nicely laid out and clear. Lexus's target market is usually a little bit older, so all the buttons on the steering wheel are quite big, clear, and easy to use. Behind that is the semi-digital display. It's got actual dials for the engine temperature and for the fuel, but the revs and speedo and all of the driving information is all digital, nicely laid out in this clean little circle with everything beside it. Up above the driver display, we have this little spindle-shaped cowl which kind of mimics the front grille shape, and at either side there's a little turning knob to control the traction control on the right or the driving mode on the left. It's got the same thing in the LC500, which is quite a big grand touring car. In a small SUV, I don't know if we really need sport mode, but we can debate that later when we're going for a drive. There's less to report here from the back seat. The main things to note though are that the USB ports back here are USB-C as opposed to the regular USB ports you get here in the center console. There's a couple of vents for the air conditioning, although you don't get climate controls back here. And then there's, of course, the regular cup holders in the armrest, although no space in the door for big water bottles or anything like that. The seats themselves though are really comfortable. I've got plenty of knee room sitting behind my own seating position. Headroom is great, and my shoulders feel pretty comfortable, and there's enough space for me. 2 adults could probably sit back here on quite a long trip, maybe even 3 if you weren't driving too far. Earlier I mentioned whether sports mode in the UX is necessary is probably up for debate, and I don't think sporty is going to be your first impression of driving the UX, nor really any of your impressions soon after that. What it is definitely a comfortable car. It's quite easy to drive, and it's smooth and pleasant, and the fact that it's not sporty probably comes down to the same reason that it is smooth and comfortable and pleasant, and that's that Corolla platform underneath. It's the Toyota TNGA platform, which actually stands for Toyota New Global Architecture. And essentially, Lexus has taken that platform and plonked the UX on top of it. But it's done so quite effectively. It means that cornering around quick corners or sharp turns is really easy to do, and you don't feel like you're in any kind of danger doing it. Everything's perfectly under control, the car feels well balanced, even the steering feels well weighted and accurate. Having said that, it is still a 1600 kilo car, and like I mentioned, it doesn't have a whole lot of power, so you're not going to feel like you're being flung out of corners with any kind of urgency. It all feels like it's designed to be pleasant rather than exciting, and it works. Here in the cabin, speaking of pleasant, all of the controls fall easily to hand, and even doing something like flicking through the safety systems with the controls on the wheel is quite easy. I can see the list here that lists things like steering assist, lane centering. There's also blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alert, and pre-collision warnings. The engine itself has no turbo, it's just a 2-litre Atmo engine, and it doesn't feel super urgent to do anything like take off or climb a hill with any kind of rush. But here in the Lexus, it doesn't sound like it's struggling too loudly at any point, even though from inside the engine bay it might. In the cabin, you're quite separated from some of the harsher engine sounds, and it's just one of those things, like I mentioned earlier, that's a touch more luxurious than you might expect from an entry model like this. A bump in the road did just remind me though, that the higher spec Lexus UXs, like this Sport Luxury or the F Sport, both have run flat tyres, which means the tyre is solid enough that if you were to get a puncture, you wouldn't need to pull over and reinflate it or fix it. That unfortunately also means the tyres are a little bit stiffer, and unlike the regular tyres you'd get on the base Luxury, let some of those bumps come through the cabin a little bit more harshly. If comfort is really super important to you, it might be one of the reasons to go for the base model. Last thing, in terms of efficiency, Lexus officially claims 4.7 litres per 100 Ks for this car. Our art director, whose long-term test car this is, has currently recorded for his first month with the car 7.1 litres per 100 Ks. At the moment, the trip computer is telling me 6.6, and our art director actually reckons there's a lot of room to improve over the months that he will have this car. So we'll have to see what happens there. I've been pretty impressed with the Lexus UX, how it's built, how it drives, and the fact that it's actually not too expensive compared to its European rivals. I think the sweet spot in its range though might actually be the base hybrid. You get the frugal drivetrain with the relatively smooth and pleasant driving experience, but you don't have the run-flat tyres to contend with. If you do look at the higher end of the UX range though, it might also be time to consider some of the European rivals, the Audi Q3, the BMW X2, or the Mercedes GLA. If you do opt for the UX, you do get a 4-year, 100,000 kilometre warranty and perks like a loan car when yours is being serviced. So if you're looking for a little bit of luxury in a small SUV, I don't think the Lexus UX will disappoint. Like I said earlier, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and you get 2 new Wheels reviews every week, and keep an eye out for the Lexus UX in the garage section of Wheels magazine. Also, let us know what you think of it down in the comments below.